Drawing portraits, drawing faces is super hard, but it doesn't have to be as hard as we make it. One big thing that trips us up is a pursuit of likeness. And I've talked about this in the previous video, I'll link it below. If you stop trying to pursue likeness for a little while, focus instead on drawing faces and their planes and the values, even if it doesn't end up looking like the original person, that's a really good way to practice and get your portraits going. Leaving that aside, what are some instances where you kind of do want a likeness? Well, something that helps with that is understanding that there are different levels of likeness. And I'm going to talk about 3 levels of likeness. So how could there possibly be different levels of likeness? Well, you know, if you've ever done a portrait, you know, you either get the likeness or you don't. It either looks like them or it doesn't, right? But hear me out. Let's say you have a goal of doing a beautiful figure drawing. It captures the beauty and visual interest of the human form, but also it's going to have interesting design elements from you in it. And it's also going to have the characteristics of the model that you're drawing or painting. So these are wonderful goals to have. What if you can do that, capture those characteristics, capture the beautiful shapes and everything, but it doesn't look exactly like them? Does anybody care? Do you care? Does even the model really care if it's a beautiful piece of work that their pose and the lighting on that scene and what interests you combined to create this image? Does it matter that the eyes needed to be 2 millimeters, down or whatever it was? I personally don't really think so. Similarly, with some portraits even, just focused on the face, these are some portraits by Nick Runge. These are people that I don't know. I'm interested in his paintings because of the paintings, the visually interesting ideas that he has, the shapes that he uses, the colors, etc. I don't care that it doesn't look like this person. So even in figure drawing and portraiture, sometimes the type of likeness that you need is not perfect accuracy. It's more about the character of the person that you're drawing. And that is something that's way easier to capture because you can put down the forms, put down the shapes, and if something that's interesting about their features, such as, I don't know, if it's like a prominent nose or something, you can capture that without it being perfectly exactly like them. What about illustration? Well, if it's a one-off illustration, this character in this illustration is going to appear just here. Obviously, it's a made-up person. It doesn't matter if it, looks like anybody because this is a fresh made-up person. If it's, you want to give them characteristics. If they're supposed to be really evil, then you'll want to give that feeling, right? They'll have an impact on the viewer, but it's not about perfect, accurate likeness to anybody. If it's a sequence of illustrations, like in a comic book or something, then you do want that character to have that consistency, for example, between the panels, right? They're turning their head from different angles. You want that to feel like the same person doing that. You then need to really understand the 3D structure of their head. But what makes this a lot easier is that you've made up the 3D structure of their head. So hopefully you really understand that structure. You can fill a sketchbook with sketches of this person from different angles, front, side, 3/4 view, until you've got that structure really consistent. But you made, the pointiness of the chin or the size of the eyes or whatever. And so you can, create character sheets over and over again until you make it consistent. And it's a type of likeness. So now let's say we're doing a portrait and you know what? One of our goals is for it to look like the person. One easy way into this is to draw strangers, right? So photographs of people that you don't know, lit from one side with clear shadow shapes. That just makes portraiture easier generally. And because you don't know them and you've only got one photo of them, you don't actually really know what they look like, right? One photo, it's a 2D thing. You would be surprised when you see them in real life. This has happened to me even on Zoom. I've met people like on Zoom, I meet them in real life and they really look different to how I thought they did because I've only seen them from the front, So getting into drawing people who you don't know lit from one side, especially if they have really pretty strong features, like really interesting characteristics, a big beard and like, I don't know what it is, like a certain shape of nose or something really unusual, then it's much easier to identify characteristics that are unique to them and bring them out. So people who you don't know with strong features lit from one side. A website I'll link below that I really like for this is called Earth's World. This is a photographer who has gone out and taken photos of people, and I find the ones on sunny days to get the strong shadow shapes. Really good practice. Then the final level, right? The final, this is the circumstance where things get tricky. Finally, you're drawing someone you know. So it could be a celebrity, someone whose face you're familiar with, I mean. So it could be a celebrity or a friend or, something like that. Or it could be like a commissioned portrait or something. Suddenly it matters that it really looks like that person for real. You know what they look like from all different angles. You really know their head and face. And it matters, right? Because if you're drawing your wife or whatever, and it doesn't quite look like them, it's every time you look at it, even if it's a beautiful drawing or painting, every time you look at this, it's going to be like, it just doesn't look like her. It looks weird. That's not her. That's not the person that I love, right? So now we really do need a high level of accuracy. It's got to be just right. How do we get there? So I'm going to give you a few ideas on how to get that accuracy. But one thing I want to emphasize is to keep doing lots of drawings of people's faces without being a slave to the likeness. It's focus on achieving the forms, understanding the planes of the face, whether you use Riley rhythms or Asaro heads or whatever it is that you're into, trying to understand how to capture natural looking faces with good volume and well-designed shapes in the values. This is going to bring up your general portrait ability. If you can start to, make that a sketching habit, then that's even better. And get in lots and lots of reps doing that. As you do that, you are naturally going to get more and more accurate anyway. Just because you've practiced more and you're more familiar, your eye will get more dialed in and tuned in. What about when I actually do want to dial up the accuracy and try to capture that likeness? So the first thing I'm looking at is kind of a couple of Loomis-based ideas. Just the bare essentials of it, not even the full Loomis head. Trying to get the sphere of the head and also a couple of the axis lines. Because I want to see, is the person looking up or down? Are they looking one way or the other? And these axis lines, the distance to each side from the axis lines, helps to explain that. And then in purple here, I have 4 spherical ideas. So there's the chin, there's the muzzle, and then there's the eyeballs. And I'm trying to notice for this person, what is the nature of that kind of spherical shape on the chin? It's a little bit, it's quite small on her. For me, I guess it would be kind of wider possibly. Some people, they might have a huge beard and then I'd use a big block for the whole beard. And so I'm really trying to notice the character of these spherical shapes on this person. Really important to think about the eyes as eyeballs, at least for me, and then I can wrap the eyelashes and eyelids over that. What I want to try and do then is see the relationships between these ideas. There's also going to be the cheeks, and so the Riley rhythms help us with those. I'm going to put some links below if you really, really want to get deep into this whole method. But right now I'm just talking about what is it that I'm actually trying to measure to get that accuracy. So once I'm sort of seeing in those simplified terms, now I need to think about some distances. And, in the Loomis book or in all kinds of methods, the big thing, a big easy way to think about this to start is the thirds. It's the same in the figure actually, that the thirds is a useful thing. And you kind of start off thinking in terms of, equal thirds, but each individual person has different proportions. So in this case, this top third and this bottom third seem about similar length. And then the middle third is longer. So it's a little bit longer. So then I'm going to try to put that down in my sketch. Now, beyond that, I can just try to then go for the width versus the height of the face. So in this case, the 2 green lines are the same length. So I decided to do it like straight through the eyes. I've seen people do it through the cheeks where it would be the widest point, but for this explanation, I'm going like through the eyes. You could do all kinds of different things, but I want to measure what's the width compared to from the chin up. So in this case, the width of the face from like the edge of the face here, right over to the sort of sideburn, so where the hair starts over here, matches up to the height of the face, but it goes a little bit, it's a little bit longer, like that's going a little bit above the brow line. So now I can make sure that I get it wide enough relative to the height of the face, and then I've got these thirds figured out. Then from there, and by the way, you don't have to use those exact measurements. It's just broadly speaking, the height versus the width, and then the thirds. Then, and I'm not using the same ones every time. It's just whatever is like, whatever I feel like is going to be easiest for me. Then I'm going to look at the angles between certain points. So one angle that's really useful to check, that I check all the time, is the inner part of the eye versus the outer part of the nose. So what's the angle of that on each side? So just checking that with a pencil like this, right? It's really useful. And then I like to go from the outside of the nose to the outside of the mouth. And I have seen people kind of going from the middle of the eye down to the outside of the mouth, but which is also something that you can check. So there's just different alignments. I find that with each person and each angle, I might check slightly different things. I'm just checking what lines up with what, and I'm trying to find the easiest ones, basically, to help me with my sketch. So then, going sort of more vertically, I'm looking at the angles. It's really easy to try and straighten everything out. There's a little bit of a diagonal, right? So if I go right through the eyes, it's not like, look, this is perfectly horizontal here. Wait, like that. You can see that the angle through the eyes is a slight angle. And I want to make sure that my angle through the eyes and angle through the nose and through the mouth and through the chin and stuff are making sense with each other, right? So I don't want them to be wonky unless that is the case in the person's face. Then I can measure some horizontal widths. So one useful one is like the eyeball width, and then you can go, okay, and often like if someone's looking straight at you, it might be an eyeball width, then an eyeball width between the eyeballs, and then the next eyeball width. And sometimes people will say that there's another eyeball width on the outer side of the head. But obviously these things vary, and as soon as the person starts to turn their head, the widths change. So I'm just basically taking an eyeball width and trying to check the distances there. So in this case, I'm using this eyeball width, and I'm just going, I'm not doing like, this is 0.87 times this. I'm just going, well, this is a little bit wider than this, and it's a little bit wider than this. It's quite a lot wider than the other eye because of perspective, and then it's obviously way wider than this on the far side. So I'm just thinking about that in simple terms. And that's it. That's it in terms of simplifying the face and measuring. So here you're going to see my process for sketching this. Now here's something that you might find interesting, is that I didn't when I was doing the sketch, I didn't do those measurements. I just went for it, right? I just put down the circle, just like I said, the sphere, the cheek rhythms of the Riley, and I'm just going for it. And then comes the next stage where I start to put in the shapes of the shadow. Very important for me to make it easier to have some nice clear shadow shapes on the face. So I start to put those in and build up the face. One of the reasons for that is once I put down this much, if it's starting to feel off already, then I'll start measuring. But my goal, one thing I love about the Riley rhythms is that they're kind of gestural, right? There's a flow to them, and you can just kind of feel your way around the portrait. And so constantly stopping and measuring would kind of disrupt that. And my goal eventually is to build up the skill to not have to measure as much. It's something that I want to be able to do for myself. It's not a necessity, but it's something that I want to do, so I'm trying to build that. So I'm trying to go for the sketch, and then I'll measure and fix it when I notice something's off. I'll go for the shapes of value and some features, and then I want to, again, keep correcting and fixing. There's going to be so much stuff that's wrong, as it builds, it'll become clearer to me all the things that are wrong and off. I want to stay on big shapes. I probably went into features like eyes, nose, and mouth too early here. Better to stay on the big shapes of light and dark, on the big shadow shapes. And then it's like you're not, you haven't got as deep into it, and you don't have to like move a whole eye that you've drawn beautifully. You're just moving around big simple shapes. So I keep going, trying to refine. And so at this point, the video is flipped. But at this point, I'm looking at the sketch and I'm looking at the reference. And the way my friend Jared puts it is, does it animate, right? So if you imagine an animation, there's a little bit of movement. You don't want it to animate. You want to flick your eyes back and forth from your reference, and hopefully when you flick your eyes back and forth, it's not like the eyes are going up and down or something. So that's going to help you to sort of refine it. And it's in that process of refining and correcting. But my goal is to freehand a sketch, not have to do too much measuring and not have to do too much correcting. That's just my personal goal. The reasons for this are, one, it depends on your goals. So the reasons that I want to be able to sketch people in this way is, number one, I want to be able to sketch from life. And hopefully in relatively organic situations. I want to sketch my wife while we're on holiday and that kind of thing. That's one thing I want to be able to do. And so I don't want to have to like take a picture, trace it, and do a grid or anything like that. Secondly, I don't want to have her to say to her, stay still for 12 hours while I copy your features exactly, right? And so I want to have these skills. A second reason for this is, again, I love that more free-flowing state of making marks and the kind of line quality that it provides. So what this means is that I'm trying to do a lot of these sketches, because the more that I do, the closer I get to that freehand sketching working well, and the sort of proportion and those ideas getting more dialed in. I've been spending this whole year building a portrait course, figuring out what's the best, most concise way to teach portraiture. And I'm not going to teach how do you do my cool style of portraits, because I don't really have a cool style of portraits. I just want to give you the nuts and bolts of how to get faces down first, with form, with the planes, the cheekbones. How do you do all of that? How do you create the face? And then you can do all your expressive, interesting, cool stuff on top of that. But I just want to give you the basic sketch, the basic drawing. That's the point of the course. And in order to do that, we're going to just do a few different things to measure, a few simplifications, not the whole Loomis head and not all the Riley rhythms, just the best things from those. Value simplification, and then face drawing before portraits, like before likeness, just being able to draw good faces from reference. And then slowly dial up the likeness dial if you want to be able to do that. So now let's talk about grids and tracing. Grids, you put a grid on the reference and then you put a grid on your paper and you kind of copy over each square, and it helps make sure everything is accurate. Or you can trace your reference and then you transfer the tracing onto paper with carbon paper, or you can use a projector, all kinds of techniques. Is that cheating? I don't think it's cheating, no, because it's accuracy, like I said, is one aspect of art. If it was the only aspect, then maybe, but it's one aspect of art. And so then the painter they have to use so much skill on top of that to create a beautiful portrait painting. How do they create the planes of the face? The grid, the tracing isn't going to do that. What design choices do they make in the shapes? Right? If it was super easy, that would be one thing, but it isn't super easy to create a great portrait painting, even with those techniques. It makes it easier to get that accuracy. And I really love a lot of paintings made that way. However, I would say I probably prefer when the artist has freehanded it and it's not completely accurate, and I can feel that. I can feel the human hand in the drawing. It's just something that I personally really like, is that humanity in basically in some of the things that are a little bit off. Secondly, when an artist is freehanding it, they can emphasize things. They can kind of lean into the aspects in terms of proportion and things like that they want to bring out. They can put in a little bit of design into the drawing itself. But people who use a grid or trace can still stylize and emphasize things in how they create the planes, how they do the values and stuff like that. So it's not cheating, I don't think, and it's not easy. I do, though, wish that portrait artists who do that would not hide it. I think some portrait artists kind of hide that away. I don't think they should be embarrassed. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. It makes people feel bad because somehow this person is like every single time knocking out completely accurate portraits and never really explaining that, yeah, I traced it, I used a projector or something like that. And I have a lot of respect for artists who make that clear, just to kind of make other artists feel okay about that, right? So I think you can think of a portrait as having a few dials on it. One of them is accuracy, accurately putting down what you're looking at. And I think a lot of people who are not super into drawing and painting think that that's the sort of be-all and end-all, the most impressive thing. Wow, it almost looks like a photo is a big compliment in that regard, right? But if you're really into drawing and painting, you start to realize that there's other dials and some of them may be more important to you. So the shape design that the artist has gone for, the edge design, the choices, even in emphasizing certain things or exaggerating certain proportions, they may like to stylize. There's all kinds of things in the colors. There's so many different things that an artist can choose to do in their drawing or painting. And the accuracy aspect is just one. For me personally, the accuracy component it's nice to have. It's not really my priority. Let me know in the comments if you think about these dials, stylized shapes, stylized edges, color choices, using these skills to create characters for your illustrations versus kind of just matching references. Or just total likeness and accuracy. Which dials do you care about? You could even put your dials and score them out of 10 about how high you want them to be. I think it's something that's really important for you to think about. If you like to trace your portraits, good for you, but don't hide it from the world. If you want to freehand your portraits, then welcome to the freehand club. It's not easy here. All right, there's another video about portraits up on the screen. Check it out, and I'll see you over there.